The man who would change everything about how Kwame Asante Boughton understood himself arrived at the compound gates at 6:52 on a Monday morning in a pressed gray shirt, carrying a small brown bag with a takeaway coffee he had not touched, and gave his name to the security guard as Emmanuel O.T. He said he was the new relief driver sent from the agency. It had a printed confirmation letter on agency letterhead, a valid driver's license in the name of Emmanuel O.T., and a phone that did not ring once during the 8-hour shift he worked that day. The security guard, whose name was Kweku, and who had been at that gate for 9 years, scanned the letter and handed it back without looking up. He had no reason to look up. The man was a driver. Drivers came and went. Kweku had processed 41 agency forms in the past 2 years, and he had long ago stopped trying to remember faces attached to them. What Kweku did not know, and what nobody on the estate of Asante Holdings Group on Cantonments Road in Accra would know for the next 7 days, was that the man in the gray shirt was worth $430 million. He had 12 properties across West Africa. He ran a conglomerate whose subsidiary companies employed 11,000 people. He had not driven himself anywhere in 6 years. Ehad also, 3 nights ago, sat in his own boardroom and listened to a presentation from his head of human resources about a staff satisfaction survey result that came back at 31%. The industry average was 64. Ehad asked what that meant in practical terms. His head of HR, a careful woman named Ajoa, who chose her words the way an architect chooses load-bearing walls, said it means the people who keep this company running do not feel seen. Ehad sat with that for 2 days. On the 3rd day, he had called the agency. His full name was Kwame Asante Boateng. He was 49 years old, 6'1", and broad through the shoulders in a way that expensive tailoring had always managed to contain and that a gray driver's shirt did not. It had a hull that people described, usually in business profiles, as determined, which was a polite word for unyielding. In the gray shirt, he looked like someone who had once been used to physical work and had drifted from it without fully forgetting it, which was, in fact, exactly what he was. He had grown up in Nima. He had carried things and fixed things and learned to read a room before he could read a balance sheet. He had built Asante Holdings from a single logistics company in 2001 with 2 trucks and a bank loan that his mother co-signed and that she would remind him of, warmly and precisely, for the rest of her life. He still wore on his right wrist a thin leather bracelet she had tied there the morning he registered the company, worn now to the color of dark tea, the knot pulled tight by 23 years of meetings and flights and handshakes and 1 or 2 moments where everything almost came apart. It had never taken it off. Some of the analysts who covered Asante Holdings had noticed it in photographs and written small wondering things about it in their profiles of him. He had never explained it. It was not for explaining. He had been thinking for longer than he had admitted to anyone that something in the company had shifted. He could not name the shift precisely in the language of strategy documents and board presentations. He felt it the way you feel weather changing, not in data, but in atmosphere. Meetings that ran to their allotted time and produced nothing. Corridors that went quiet when he appeared. Laughter in a room that stopped the moment he pushed the door. The 31% survey result was not a surprise. It was a number attached to a feeling he had been carrying for 18 months without being able to prove it. He needed to see from the ground. He needed to hear what nobody said to his face. The first person he drove that Monday was a deputy finance manager named Bright Darko, 34, 3 years with the company, a pressed shirt, and the particular tiredness of someone who had been at his desk by 7 for longer than was sustainable. Bright got in the back, gave the address of the main Asante Holdings office on the Ring Road, and then spent 11 minutes on his phone with his head bowed. He did not speak to the driver. In this, Bright was indistinguishably from the other 4 passengers Kwame drove that week, who knew him only as Emmanuel Oti and who treated him the way most people treat drivers, as a functional part of the commute, present but not quite there. By Wednesday morning, Kwame had driven 7 members of his staff and had heard in between the phone calls and the WhatsApp messages and the route instructions very little of consequence. It was beginning to wonder if the discomfort he felt in the company was atmospheric, something that lived in the walls of the building and disappeared in open air. Then he drove Patience Owusu. Patience was 38. She was the senior procurement coordinator for Asante Holdings' construction materials division. She had been with the company for 9 years. She arrived at the pickup point on Labaume Road at 7:14 on Wednesday morning, with a cloth bag in one hand and a folder tucked under her arm, and the posture of someone carrying more than what was in her hands. She got in the front, which none of the other passengers had done. She said good morning, which not all of them had. She smelled faintly of shea butter and something like starch, the kind of starch that comes from ironing with an iron that has to be heated on a gas ring rather than plugged in. She had a small scar along the edge of her left jaw that pulled slightly when she pressed her lips together, which she did twice in the first 2 minutes of the drive, the way a person does when they are deciding whether or not to say something. She decided to say something. "You're new," she said. "Not accusatory. Observational." "Yes," Kwame said. "First week." She nodded. She looked out the window at the Labone traffic and was quiet for a moment. "How are you finding it?" she said. "The driving?" "Fine," he said. "The company," she said. He glanced at her briefly. "Hard to say after a week," he said. "People seemed professional." She made a sound. Not a word. A sound that contained an entire paragraph. The sound of someone who has heard the word professional applied to a situation they have direct, irreversible knowledge of and found the gap between the word and the situation nearly unnavigable. She pressed her lips together again. The scar along her jaw moved. Then she said, "They are professional. That's not the problem." "What's the problem?" he said. He kept his voice flat, the voice of a new driver making conversation. "Nothing more." She looked at him for a moment. Then she looked back at the road ahead and she said quietly and precisely, "The problem is that the man who built this company hasn't been inside it in a long time. He comes in, he walks through, he signs things, he goes." She paused. "The company he built in 2001, those people felt something. They stayed. We had a woman in the warehouse. Mrs. Ade, been here since 2003. Do you know what she got when she left? A letter. A standard letter. His assistant printed it. It had her name wrong." She pressed the folder against her lap. 20 years. A letter with her name wrong. The Accra Ring Road was beginning to stack with morning traffic. Kwame kept his eyes on the car in front of him. His hands were steady on the wheel. The leather bracelet on his right wrist was hidden under his shirt cuff, and he was aware of it the way you are aware of something when you suddenly remember it exists. "Did anyone tell him?" he said. "About the letter." She turned to look at him. It was the look of someone deciding, again, how much further to go. "People tell him what he wants to hear," she said. "That's not specific to him. That's what happens when you get to a certain level. But he used to know how to get past it. He used to walk the floor. He used to know people's names. I remember when he came to find out why the procurement timelines were running long. Didn't call a meeting, didn't send a consultant, came to the floor himself, sat down, asked questions. That was 2014. I haven't seen him on the floor since." She stopped herself. She looked back out the window. "I'm sorry," she said. "You didn't ask for all of that." "I asked," he said. She was quiet for the rest of the journey. When he pulled up to the office building on the Ring Road, she gathered her bag and folder and opened the door. Then she stopped. She turned back. "Get the names right," she said. "If you're new, whatever they ask you to do, get the names right. It's the first thing people stop doing and the last thing they think matters." She closed the door. He sat in the parked car for 4 minutes after she went in. He did not check his phone. He sat with his hands in his lap and looked at the dashboard in front of him and understood, in the way that you understand things when someone says them plainly to a person they don't know you are, that he had been given a gift he had not earned. He had also understood, before she finished her second sentence, that she was right. Not about all of it, about enough of it that the distinction was irrelevant. If you can feel where this is going, stay with me. Because what Kwame found in the 4 remaining days of that week, and what he did with it in the 3 months that followed, is the part that makes this story something other than a reckoning. It drove 4 more people before the week ended. It drove the night security supervisor, a quiet man named Ofori, who had worked the midnight shift at the cantonment's compound for 6 years, and whose contract had been reviewed twice without a raise. Ofori did not complain. He sat in the back with his hands folded in his lap and his eyes heavy from the shift he had just finished, and he said almost nothing for the 23 minutes it took to drive him from cantonments to his home in Medina, he said only one thing of consequence, and he said it when the car stopped at his gate with one hand already on the door. The way people say things they have decided not to say, and then say anyway. You know what's funny? I've been here 6 years, and I don't think anyone upstairs knows my name. My shift supervisor knows it. Kweku at the gate knows it. But the people who signed the letters, they signed them to the night security team, like we're one person. He got out, he closed the door without force. He walked up the path to his front door and did not look back. Kwame sat with the engine idling and looked at the name on the contact sheet on the passenger seat. Ofori Mensa, night security supervisor. He folded the contact sheet in half and placed it in the cup holder. He drove two women from the administrative support team, Gifty and Nana, whose surnames he had to look up on the team list because nobody had thought to include them on the daily transport manifest. Ho spent the entire 40-minute drive discussing a mandatory software training they had received 2 weeks earlier from a vendor who had spent 40 minutes demonstrating a system that none of their actual job functions used, and who had been told, when they raised this in the training session, that feedback forms were available at the end. The feedback forms went to the vendor's account manager. Gifty had followed up with the account manager directly. The account manager had said the feedback was appreciated and that the vendor looked forward to their continued partnership with Asante Holdings. Continued partnership, Nana repeated at some point during the drive, with the particular flatness of someone quoting a phrase that has stripped the last of their capacity for surprise. She was looking out the window at the Accra traffic, and she said it the way you say something when you have stopped expecting the situation to change and have moved on to simply recording it. It drove a young logistics analyst named Ama Asade, 26 years old, small and quick-eyed, carrying a laptop bag with a pin on the strap that said, "Think Smarter," who had been trying for 4 months to get a direct meeting with anyone in senior management about a routing inefficiency she had identified that she calculated, using the company's own logistics data, was costing the business approximately 80,000 cedis a month in unnecessary fuel consumption and overtime payments. She had quantified it. She had verified the numbers twice. She had built a proposal document that was 41 slides long and included a 3-month pilot program, a projected return timeline, and a risk register. She had submitted it through the official internal proposals process on a Tuesday in February. She had received an automated acknowledgement email that confirmed her submission and informed her that proposals were reviewed on a rolling basis and that she would hear back within 6 to 8 weeks. She had heard nothing at the 6-week mark. She had followed up. She had received a second automated email. She had, in the past 3 weeks, begun updating her CV. She told Kwame this without being asked. He had asked only how she was finding the work. The answer came out in a controlled, factual sequence that had the structure of something rehearsed for a different audience, a manager, a review, a conversation she had been trying to get for months and having instead with a driver on the way to the office. She stopped herself partway through. "Sorry," she said. "Too much." "No," he said. She looked at the side of his face. "Do they usually talk to you?" she said. "Some people," he said. "Why do you think that is?" she said. He thought about it for a moment. "Because I'm not going to repeat it to anyone important," he said. She looked back out the front window. "Right," she said quietly. On Friday afternoon at 4:15, Kwame returned the company card to the pool, handed in the agency ID card, and drove himself home in his own car. He sat in his kitchen for an hour with a pad of paper. He wrote down 6 names. He wrote down the things each person had said, as precisely as he could reconstruct them. He wrote down Mrs. Adai's name, and he wrote beside it, 20 years. He wrote Emma's name, and he wrote beside it, 80,000 cedis a month. He looked at the leather bracelet on his wrist. He thought about the morning in 2001 when his mother tied it there and said, "You're going to build something real. Make sure you remember what real means." He had thought, for much of the past decade, that real meant scale, buildings, revenue, holdings. That was not what she meant, and he had always known it, and this was not a comfortable thing to know, so mostly he had not looked directly at it. He called Adjoa, his head of HR, on Saturday morning. He sighed, "I need you to pull the full file on a Mrs. Adai. She left the company. She would have been in the warehouse division, started around 2003. I need to know what her departure documentation looked like, and I need to know who authorized the letter she received. Adhoa was quiet for a moment. Can I ask? Pull the file first, he said. We'll talk Monday. On Monday, he called a meeting. Not a board meeting, not a senior leadership convening. He sent a message to 6 people. Patience Owusu, Bright Darko, Ofori, the 2 administrative support women whose names he had written down correctly on Friday night, and Emma, the logistics analyst. He sent the messages himself, not through his assistant. The messages said, I would like an hour of your time on Wednesday morning. No agenda. No presentation required. Breakfast will be provided. Please come as you are. 4 of the 6 replied within 2 hours. Patience replied at 11:47 p.m. that Monday with a single line, I'll be there. Amma replied within 6 minutes with a message that was 3 lines long and started with of course, and then, because she was 26 and had not yet learned to leave things at of course, continued, and if it's appropriate, I do have a proposal I've been trying to get in front of someone. I wrote back, bring it. The Wednesday meeting was held in a room on the 2nd floor of the Ring Road building, not in the boardroom. E had asked that the regular table be replaced with a round one, which his facilities manager had accomplished by sourcing a table from the break room on the 4th floor, and which had on it, when the 6 people arrived, jollof rice in serving bowls and fried plantain, and a pot of ground pepper soup and water and tea. He was already in the room when they came in. He was in a white shirt. He stood up when each person entered. He sighed when they were seated, I owe some of you an apology, a specific one. He looked at each person in turn. Mrs. Adae received a letter with her name wrong. After 20 years. He didn't write that letter, and I didn't authorize that letter, but that is my company and everything it produces is my responsibility. I'm sorry. He looked at his hands. I've been running this company from a floor where you can't hear what's actually happening. That's on me, and I intend to fix it. He paused. I'm not here to ask you to tell me everything is fine. I'm here because you're the people who know what isn't. Patience Ousu sat across the round table from him with her cloth bag on the back of her chair and the folder she always carried placed on the table in front of her. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, You drove me on Wednesday. The room went quiet. He met her eyes. He did not look away. Yes, he said. She pressed her lips together. The scar along her jaw moved. Then she said, Good. Just that. The single word carried more inside it than most speeches carry in 20 minutes. She opened her folder. Then let's not waste the hour. Amma presented her routing proposal. It was 41 slides long, and it was one of the most thorough pieces of internal analysis Kwame had seen in 7 years of reading internal analysis. It told her so directly, in the meeting, in front of the others. She looked at the table when he said it and then looked back up. He asked her what she would need to run a 3-month pilot. She said, authorization, access to the logistics data system, and 1 direct report. He sighed, You'll have all 3 by Thursday. He asked her after the meeting whether she had interviewed elsewhere in the past 4 months. She said yes. He said, What would it take to keep you? She named a number. He said, Done. In the weeks that followed the Wednesday meeting, Ajoa's team ran a second staff survey. Not the annual one, a shorter pulse survey with 6 questions, administered through a channel that did not require names. The satisfaction figure came back at 41%, still below industry average. Still not good, but 10 points higher than it had been 6 weeks earlier, and moving. Adhoa reported this at a management meeting and said, with the precision she brought to everything, movement is not arrival, but it is evidence that arrival is possible. Kwame authorized 3 new things before the end of that quarter. A formal peer recognition program in which any staff member could nominate a colleague for a monthly acknowledgement. Nota certificate. A handwritten note from the office of the CEO with the person's name spelled correctly. A direct access reporting channel through which any employee could submit a proposal or a concern directly to a panel that included 2 non-executive board members, and a standing weekly session, 2 hours every Friday morning, where Kwame sat in a different part of the building with no agenda and no prepared materials, available to anyone who wanted to use the time. It called it an open floor. The facilities team made a small sign for the door that said those 2 words, open floor. It was not elegant, It was the most important sign in the building. The first Friday, 3 people came. The second, 7. By the sixth Friday, the session had to be moved to a larger room because 19 people had signed up. He did not think of this as a triumph. He thought of it as evidence of everything that had not existed before, which was not something to be proud of. It was a debt being paid. There was a difference. Patience Owusu came on the fourth Friday. She brought a proposal for a revised procurement approval process that she had been developing, she said, for 2 years. She placed it on the table without preamble. She said, "I didn't know who to give this to." He took it. He read it that evening. It was good. He sent it to Ajoa and the head of operations with a note that said, "Implement." He sent a message to Patience the following morning. "I read it last night. It's the right approach. I'm sorry it took this long to get to me." She wrote back, "It took as long as it took. That's what matters now." He kept her reply on his phone. He did not explain to anyone why. There is a habit that power develops quietly, without being asked to, the habit of receiving only the version of the world that is comfortable to receive. It is not corruption. It is not dishonesty. It is something more ordinary and therefore more dangerous. It is the natural human tendency of people around power to give power what power seems to want. And power, over time, mistakes the edited version for the real one. Kwame Asante Boateng had not stopped caring about his company. He had stopped being close enough to it to know what caring required. Those are not the same failure, but they produce the same wound. What a gray shirt and a week behind a steering wheel returned to him was not information. He had had the information in the survey result, 31%. That was the number. What the week returned to him was specific key, which is the only form in which information becomes real. Not staff satisfaction is low. Mrs. Adai, 20 years. A letter with her name wrong. Not employees feel unheard. Ama, 4 months. 80,000 cities a month going nowhere because nobody met her in the right room. Not the culture has deteriorated. Patience. In the passenger seat saying the company he built hasn't been inside in a long time. Specificity is not decoration. It is the mechanism by which people stop being data and become people. You have walked past someone in your own life who was holding something this important. Not a document, a truth. Something about what your house sounds like when you're not in it. What your name means to the people who say it when you can't hear them. What it costs other people to work around the parts of you that have stopped being present. Most of us never find out. We receive the edited version until it is the only version we believe. The ones who find out are the ones who have the discipline, or the humility, or the moment of honest fear to get in the car and drive. Leave your answer in the comments, and I want you to be honest. If you found out tonight what your staff, or your team, or your family said about you when you weren't in the room, would you want to know? And if it was hard to hear, would you sit with it? Or would you reach for a reason it wasn't true? Tell me, because the people who answer that question honestly are the people who change something. Subscribe for more stories about hidden strength, quiet power, and the people the world overlooks until they change everything. I'll see you in the next one.